Hello friends, it's your old pal the Colonel here, and welcome to another episode of Gold Coast Beamer's Garage. This week's show is brought to you by Eric's Visor Crap, the crappiest crap money can buy for getting crap off of your visor. Eric's Visor Crap comes in a convenient 5-ounce bottle with a protective cap so you can carry it along with you when you ride. Just a couple of sprays on your visor, wipe it with a soft cloth, and you're good to ride. Remember, you'll have clear vision in a snap when you use Eric's Visor Crap. Available online and at fine retailers everywhere. Eric's Visor Crap. Well, as you can see, it's still April, and I thought maybe this month we might talk about batteries. Batteries are one of those things in your motorcycle that you don't give much thought to until it gives you a reason to think about it. And that's when you get on the bike and you hit the starter, and either it cranks kind of slow and kind of gives you a warning something might be going wrong. Other times you get on there and you hit the starter and it's just dead as Kelsey's nuts. So if that happens to you, what are you going to do? Go get a new battery? Well, that's probably what you're going to need. But one of the first things you want to do would be check a couple of obvious things that could be the problem. One, look at the battery terminals. Be sure they're tight. Sure the cables are tight to the terminals. They don't have to be very loose before you have a bad connection and you can't draw enough current to turn your engine. In the old days, you used to see corrosion on battery terminals. We don't see that so much anymore, and we'll talk about why in a minute, so that's probably not going to be the issue. But if your battery terminals are tight and you're still not cranking the engine, then probably what you want to do is check to see if your battery is really the problem. And one of the ways you can do that is you can pull it out of the bike, carry it on down to the local auto parts store, and they'll have a load tester, and they'll put it on there and tell you whether your battery's good or not. But you can save yourself a little bit of a hassle, and you can check it yourself, and here's the way you do it. You want to get your multi-tester. If you don't have one of these, you should. You can get them very, very cheap. I mean 10, 12 bucks or less anywhere. And turn it on and set the scale to something like 20 volts, because this is a 12-volt battery. So take your two leads, obviously take the negative to the negative and the positive to the positive, and check it, and you're going to see, well, this one says 12.45 volts. So you might think, well, gee, it's a 12-volt battery, it's got over 12 volts in it, it should be good. Well, that's not exactly the case. What you need to do is you need to check it under a load. That's why when you carry it down to the auto parts store, they put it on a load tester. Well, how do I put a load on it? Well, you're going to need an assistant for this because this is kind of a three-hand operation. I've tried to do it myself, and you need a helper to do it. But go ahead and put your leads on the battery and then have someone hit the starter. And watch your multimeter, and if the voltage drops down below 10, that's a pretty good signal that your battery's on the way out. If it drops down around 9 or into the 8s, it's already said goodbye. So now, assume that's what happens, you're going to need a new battery. So what kind of battery are you going to get? Well, nowadays we have some choices. Back 10, 12 years ago, we didn't have any choices. The only battery that you could get was what was called a flooded lead acid battery. And if you'll remember those were the batteries that had 6 little cells in them with the little caps on there, and it was flooded. The reason it was called flooded is it was flooded with an electrolyte. Now, you may ask, what's an electrolyte and who came up with it? Who invented it? Well, the electrolyte is the medium that allows the ions in the battery to travel from one plate to the other. In a flooded lead acid battery, that's made up of about 65% water and about 35% sulfuric acid. So you remember back in the days when you had to pull all those little caps off and look down in there and be sure there was enough water in there because it would evaporate out. Because all these batteries, if you recall, had a little vent tube that ran down the side to vent the gases out. So you would top them off, and that's the way you maintain your battery. Now, they're a real pain in the butt if you happen to fall over on your motorcycle, not that that's ever happened to any of us, because when you did, that electrolyte would start coming out that vent hole. It'd get on the paint, on your bike, on the frame, on your riding pants. It'd get all over everywhere. So that was a real mess. But you say, well, who invented electrolytes? Well, we need look no further than James Brown, who can answer that question for us. James told us that man invented the car to carry us over the road. Man invented the train to carry their heavy load. Man invented the electrolyte to take us out of the dark. And man invented the boat on the water like Noah made the ark. It's a man's world, but it would be nothing without a woman or a girl. So there you go. James Brown's answered the question. I think he meant man made the electric light, but for our purposes, he also made the electrolyte. So it's hard to find one of those flooded batteries anymore, at least for a motorcycle. You can still find them for cars. Again, cars don't typically tip over. If they do, you got a big problem. But fortunately, most of the lead acid batteries nowadays are a type of battery called AGM. And that stands for absorbed glass mat. So you might think, what kind of glass is that mat? Well, it's fiberglass. And what it does, it absorbs the electrolyte solution, and it goes between the plates, and that eliminates that electrolyte slopping around, venting out the side, because these are now sealed batteries. So you don't have to do any maintenance to them. You never have to check them. You can mount them in any orientation, not that that's important for a motorcycle, but again, if you happen to dump your bike over on the side, the acid's all not going to flood out on it. Now, this particular battery is a battery that I had in my motorcycle, my 07 RT, and it's made by Odyssey. It's a model called the PC680, and PC680 will fit a number of BMW motorcycles. This battery, when I took it out, was 8 years old, and I only took it out because it was sounding like it was starting to crank a little slow, and I thought, man, after 8 years, I've got my money's worth. So I put another one in. I am a big fan of Odyssey batteries. I always keep it on a tender, pull the bike in the garage, hook the tender up to it, but it never ever let me down. Now, how come I'm hanging on to it? Well, we're going to diverge just a minute here, and I always keep an old motorcycle battery around because from time to time, one of the batteries in your car will need to be changed out. And cars nowadays, especially the new ones, have so much electronics in them that they don't like to be without power. They've got to have some amount of power. It used to be all you would lose if you took all the power away was your radio presets. But now it's much more complicated than that. For example, our Mini, which is, well, I guess it's 7 years old. I was reading online about changing out the battery just to be sure what I had to deal with. And one of the things that goes away if you don't keep power to it is the one-touch function on the windows. So normally you just hit the button up and let go and it goes all the way up, or tap it and it goes all the way down. Well, you lose that if you lose power, and you got to go back to the dealer. They got to plug the computer up to it, and they got to reprogram it. And I can only imagine in a 7-year-old car how much stuff you lose nowadays. So if you want to avoid a trip down to the dealer and paying all that dealer cost, go online, and you can buy a cable online that has an OBD2 onboard diagnostic port. That's where they plug the computer into your car. It's usually under the left-hand side of the dashboard. You can plug this into your car. You've got a couple alligator clips. You clip them up to your battery, and I always put this battery on a tender overnight, and it'll bring it back up to 12.5 volts. Plenty of power to keep the car energized. Plug that in, now you got power to the car. You take your battery out, put the new battery in, hook it all up, unplug this, good to go, you didn't lose anything. So these are available online for about 20 bucks. And let me tell you, you only use it one time, you more than save your money. So, lead acid batteries, that's the ones that perform well for me. But nowadays, we have another choice, and that's a lithium easy for you to say, a lithium ion battery. Pardon me, Eric. Yeah. Now, our production budget here is pretty slim, so we didn't have the money to go out and buy a lithium ion battery. But I mocked one up out of some cardboard from an Amazon box. And lithium ion batteries offer some significant advantages over lead acid batteries. First of all, this battery is 12 pounds. Pretty hefty battery. This battery, well, if it were real, is 3 pounds. Significant weight savings. This battery has 170 cold cranking amps. This battery has 315 cold cranking amps. By the way, these are the specs for a Shorai battery. There's a number of different manufacturers out there. I just happened to pull this one offline and I had all the specs. This battery is $130. This battery is $230. So some pretty significant advantages. More cranking power. They are said to hold a charge significantly longer, up to a year if it's fully charged, as long as there's no parasitic drain on it. So it will hold a charge much longer than a conventional lead acid battery. Are there any disadvantages? Well, certainly. One is the cost, $230, $100 more than this battery. The other is that because it's a little different size, and typically they're smaller, you can see this is smaller. Now, this one is actually thinner than this battery. This battery fits in my battery compartment on the RT very well. It has a little space front to back, but not enough that it moves around. This battery, you can see, is not as wide and certainly not as tall. Most of the lithium-ion batteries come with material to allow you to shim or build up the excess space to your battery compartment. So this one, clearly, to get your battery cables to attach properly, you're going to have to shim it up on the bottom to at least where it's level so your battery cables can hook up. The other thing is cold weather performance. Now, wish we had to deal with cold weather performance here, but if we take a ride up north and you get up in the morning and it's say 40 degrees outside, these lithium-ion batteries need to be excited before they'll provide the maximum cranking power. You need to tickle it a little bit, get it excited. You know what I mean? And the way you would do that would be maybe turn the ignition on your bike and leave it on for a minute or maybe 2 minutes. That will create enough draw on this battery to warm it up and get it cooking, and then it'll crank fine. But that is another downside to it. Another thing is, if you want to keep this on a tender, you're going to need a special charger. You can't use a conventional battery tender or charger on a lithium-ion battery. Now, Battery Tender happens to make one for like $40, and it's actually switchable. You can switch it to a conventional battery or lithium-ion either way. So that's not a big impediment. So that's really the comparison. So what are you going to do? You need a new battery? What's the right answer? Well, it's up to you. 12 pounds versus 3 pounds, 170 cold cranking amps versus 315, $130 versus $230. There's really no right answer. It's all up to you. So that's about what we've got to say about batteries. I'd like to thank our sponsor this week, Eric's Visor Crap. Our production assistant is Mary Lou, my sweetheart Miller. Our accounting supervisor is Candace B. Rittenoff. Our accounts payable supervisor is Bill Schroeder. And as always, our motorcycle repair advisor is Anita Hammer. Tune in next week for another show. If you have a comment or a question, write it to us at goldcoastbeamers@outlook.com or post it up on the Facebook page. Well, there's one other thing. One of our viewers, Mark from Jupiter, asked if we could turn on the beer sign. And I forgot to do that last week, and I don't leave it on because it's pretty bright, kind of washes out the camera, but for Mark, we're going to give it a turn on here. Whoop. There you are, Mark. Miller High Life. Okay, if you're out riding, Be aware, take care, and we'll see you next week.